Hi, everybody. It's me, Grandma Lily, here to bring you Story Time with Grandma Lily. Today is April 19th. It is Sunday. And today we're going to give a special shout out to two people. First of all, it is my sister's birthday, and her name is Tony. And so we're all going to say happy birthday, Tony, because today is Tony's birthday, and she's my sister, and I love her very much. And so I want to say happy birthday to her today. The other person that I want to say happy birthday to is a great kid, and this great kid's name is Casey. And I want to say happy birthday, Casey. Casey lives in Florida, and I know that Casey's very disappointed because we're all stuck inside, and Casey can't celebrate a birthday and can't have a party and can't have cake and friends can't come over. So I'm saying right now, I'm saying a very happy birthday today to Casey, because today is Casey's birthday, but sometime this week, I'm going to be reading Casey a very special story. Okay, so that's where we are now. I want to say hello and I love you to my grandbabies, Jordan, Kylie, Elijah, and my granddaughter, Serenity. I think spring break is over. You have to go back to school on Monday. And so today we're going to read a book that I read to my children when they were little, but really it's a book that existed even when I was a little girl. And the name of that book is Make Way for Ducklings. And the person who wrote that book, his name is Robert McCloskey. And he wrote a lot of books long time ago. And he won a lot of awards for them. They're very, very good books. And I love this one. So right now we're going to read Make Way for Ducklings. So get your stuffies, get your blankets, get your milk and cookies, and let's read Make Way for Ducklings. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. And this was awarded the Caldecott Medal as the most distinguished American picture book for children in the year of its publication. That means, kids, that the year that this book came out, it won a medal as being one of the most important children's picture books. And that's Make Way for Ducklings, and there's Robert McCloskey's name, and we will tell you 1941. 1941, guys, that is when this book was published. So we are going to read now Make Way for Ducklings. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Here you can see the little island. Next morning, they fished for breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. So what do you think? See that big bird? I think it's kind of part of the boat and they don't see that. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies, with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." You see that? Look at that. The bicycle almost hit the duck. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. These are all places in Boston, kids. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice, quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." They're talking about that little island right there. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones came in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that, the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack and Knack, and Whack, and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. There you are, the little ducklings, all of them. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. I'm sure you've seen this when you've gone to the park, guys. A mama duck with a whole bunch of baby ducks following. There, they waded ashore and waddled along until they came to the highway. They shouldn't cross the highway because they could get hurt, right? Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. "Honk, honk," went the horns on the speeding cars. "Whack," went Mrs. Mallard as she stumbled back again. "Quack, quack, quack, quack," went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. It's kind of scary, right? They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He planted himself in the corner of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the Ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. You see the ducklings? Ducks and the ducklings, they're right there. He got them across the street safely. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks," yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street, with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. There they go, past the bookstore. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the Ducklings could march across the street. There they are. Right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when the night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. And that is the end. So, guys, this book was written so long ago that my mommy, who would be, oh my goodness, 80 years old if she were still with us today, she was only 1 year old when this book was written. And you can see, if you look at it, and you look at all of the pictures, and you see how all of the cars look different, and how the policeman stopped to let the ducks cross the street. You don't see that too often now, do you? But that's what you learned today. We heard Make Way for Ducklings. Tomorrow, back to Seuss. But today, we saw Robert McCloskey. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you have a great night's sleep and a good day tomorrow. And just remember that Grandma Lily loves you. Bye-bye, kids.